Many of the things in the Old Testament were written to help us understand things that happen in our lives. In Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 19, Jeremiah cries out in a way that I think all of us can relate to. Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 19. Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 19. Listen to the words of Jeremiah. O my soul, I am pained in my very heart. My heart makes a noise in me. I cannot hold my peace because you've heard, O my soul, the sound of the trumpet, the alarm of war. He says, I am pained in my very heart. He knew pain. Now notice the words of the psalmist in Psalm 55. Psalm 55. And let's read verse 4. Psalm 55, verse 4. It's considered to be one of David's. My heart is severely pained within me, and the terrors of death have fallen upon me. David certainly knew the experience of pain and suffering. All of us have experienced pain and suffering. We know how it feels. We can relate to Jeremiah. We can relate to David. We can relate to those others in the Old Testament and the New who express this pain and this suffering. But why? Why is there pain and suffering? And probably more than any other reason or excuse, this is what people will say is the reason they don't believe in God. They say, if pain and suffering exist in the world, then why does God allow it? If God is all-powerful, then He ought to be able to get rid of pain and suffering. But there's pain and suffering in the world, therefore He's not all-powerful. And so their argument goes. And so many people in the world simply do not believe in God because there is pain in the world, because there's suffering in the world. And so, how is a Christian to respond? We've experienced pain, we've experienced suffering, so being a Christian doesn't exclude us from experiencing extreme pain and extreme suffering. So when people tell us, well, I don't believe in God because there is pain and suffering, how should we respond? Where did pain and suffering come from? When did it originate? And how should we respond to it when pain and suffering comes to us or when pain and suffering comes to those to whom we know? The first thing we want to look at tonight is the very beginning of the Bible, which informs us that suffering has not always existed. Suffering has not always existed. God did not bring suffering into the world. When we read Genesis chapters 1 and 2, which describe to us the beginning of the world, the creation of the world, creation of the universe, the creation of plant life and animal life, and the creation of human life, we see in those verses over and over and over again, after God created, what did He say? It was good. After He created the world, it was good. After He created the planets and all that, it was good. After He planted earth, it was good. After He created plant life, it was good. So over and over again, He uses that expression. In Genesis chapter 1, notice what verse 31 says about creation. Genesis chapter 1, verse 31. Then God saw everything that He had made, and indeed it was very good. So the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So God did not bring pain and suffering into the world. Everything that He made, He said and He pronounced it being good. Goodness is part of who God is. In other words, that's a part of His character. That's one of His qualities. That's part of who He is He is a good God. The psalmist mentions this in Psalms 145. Actually, a lot of this psalm is about God's goodness, but in particular, look at verse 7. Psalm 145 Beginning in verse 7. Psalm 145, beginning in verse 7. And notice how goodness is a part of who God is. Verse 7 of Psalm 145. They shall utter the memory of your great goodness, and shall sing of your righteousness. The Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger and great in mercy. The Lord is good to all, and His tender mercies are over all His works. God is a God of goodness. So we cannot blame God for evil and suffering in the world. He didn't originate it. He didn't create it. The original creation, including man, was declared good. Everything was declared good. So when we are in contact with people and they talk about, pain and suffering and so forth, we need to say that the Bible is very clear that God did not bring evil and suffering